Video we'll see about pleura. What is pleura? Pleura is a double layered membrane which covers the lungs. So these are the two lungs and the median part is the mediastinum part. So pleura, it is a layer of flat mesothelial cells along with the connective tissue forms the pleura which covers both the lungs. So it is a double layered membrane. So the outer layer is called as the parietal pleura and the inner layer is called as the visceral pleura, since it is closely related to the visceral part, that is the lung. So visceral pleura, it is adheres to the surface of the lung as well as to the mediastinum. And in the space between the parietal pleura and the visceral pleura is the pleural cavity. So this pleural cavity is filled with the thin serous fluid. So the double layered membrane, parietal pleura and the visceral pleura. We'll see about each pleura in detail. Now we'll see about parietal pleura. We'll see about parietal pleura. So we'll see about its parts, its extension and its innervation. First we'll see about its parts. So it is divided into 4 parts according to the organ it is related to. So first will be the cervical part. So since it is related to the neck portion, so it is called as the cervical part. Second one is the costal part. So this part is related to the ribs and the intercostal spaces. So it is called as the costal part. This part is related to the diaphragm, so called as the diaphragmatic part. And this part is related to the mediastinal part, so it is called as the mediastinal part. And then its extension, so it extends above the first rib superiorly and inferiorly in the mid clavicular line. It extends up to the 8th rib. We are taking this as 8th, 9th and the 10th ribs. So in the mid clavicular line it extends up to the 8th rib. If you draw a mid axillary line, it extends up to the 10th rib. So superior and inferior extension. So and then innervation, the costal part is innervated by the branches of the intercostal nerves. So where are the intercostal nerves from? So thoracic spinal nerve is divided into anterior portion and posterior portion. From the anterior part, the intercostal nerves arise. From the intercostal nerves, the branches innervate the costal part. And the mediastinal part and the diaphragmatic part is innervated by the phrenic nerves. Phrenic nerves, we know it supplies the diaphragm. Along with it, it supplies the mediastinal part, diaphragmatic part. So where are the phrenic nerves from? The branches from cervical spinal nerves C3 and C4 and C5 give rise to phrenic nerve, which supplies the mediastinal part and diaphragmatic part. Since these 3 dermatomes also supply the lateral part of the neck and the supraclavicular region, pain is referred to this region if the actual pain is present here. So again we'll see quickly about it. Parts, the first cervical part, costal part, diaphragmatic part, mediastinal part. It is extending to the cervical region, so cervical part, ribs and intercostal spaces, diaphragm and the mediastinum. So extension, it is extending above the first rib superiorly and extending up to 8th rib inferiorly along the mid-clavicular line and 10th rib along the mid-axillary line inferiorly. And its innervation is costal part by the branches from intercostal nerves, which is in turn a branch from the anterior part of the thoracic nerve. And the mediastinal part and the diaphragmatic part is supplied by the phrenic nerves, which in turn is a branch from the C3, C4 and C5 spinal nerves. Visceral pleura. So now we'll see about the visceral pleura. Like parietal pleura, which has costal part, cervical part, mediastinal part and diaphragmatic part, it does not has any parts because it is just related to the lungs. So it goes along with the fissures of the lungs and is just related to the lungs. So it is not divided into any parts. So extension, like parietal pleura, it is not extending above the ribs, first rib as well as the 8th and 10th ribs, etc. So it is just confined to the lung itself. So it has no extensions. It just runs along with the surface of the lung. So and its innervation, it is innervated by the visceral afferent nerves. So the vagus nerve and the sympathetic fibers innervate them, which basically runs along with the bronchial blood vessels. So visceral pleura does not has any pars, doesn't extend like parietal pleura, and its innervation is visceral afferent nerves, which is the vagus nerve and the sympathetic nerves. Now we'll see about the pleural recesses. Pleural recesses. The space which is not occupied by the lungs contribute to the pleural recesses. So what is mean by that? So if the pleural cavity is occupied by the lungs, then the visceral pleura and the parietal pleura opposes each other. If the lungs is not occupying the pleural cavity, then two layers of parietal pleura opposes each other. So what is mean by that? So here the costal pleura and the diaphragmatic pleura opposes each other, instead of the parietal pleura and the visceral pleura being opposing each other. So it contributes to the costodiaphragmatic recess. So if the costal pleura and the diaphragmatic pleura opposes each other, it is called as the costodiaphragmatic recesses formed. So anteriorly we know we have the costal pleura, and medially we have the mediastinal pleura. If these two pleura opposes each other, it contributes to the costomediastinal recess. In this picture we cannot depict because it is just a 2D diagram. We can just imagine in the 3D view as the costal pleura and the mediastinal pleura opposing each other. The costal pleura, which is anteriorly, the mediastinal pleura medially. If it opposes each other, it contributes to the costomediastinal recess. So the pleural recesses are of two types. Two pleural recesses are present, the costomediastinal recess and the costodiaphragmatic recess. So anteriorly costomediastinal recess is present, and posterior-inferiorly costodiaphragmatic recess is present. The costal pleura and the diaphragmatic pleura opposing each other. The anteriorly costal pleura and the mediastinal pleura opposing each other. About the clinical importance of pleura. So we know in the pleural cavity it is filled with thin serous fluid. If there is an increased fluid accumulation in the pleural cavity, it leads to a problem called as the pleural effusion. So, and then another problem is the pneumothorax. When air is filled instead of fluid in the pleural cavity, it is called as a pneumothorax. In both these conditions, the lung could not expand as it could. So lung compromises and it leads to breathing difficulties. These are the two important clinical conditions. So now we'll quickly review about whatever we have seen now. We'll have a quick review about whatever we have seen now. So we have seen what is pleura. It is a double layered membrane which covers the lung, and the space between the two layers is the pleural cavity. And we have seen about parietal pleura and visceral pleura, its parts, its extension and innervation. And then pleural recesses, two types of recess, costomediastinal and costodiaphragmatic recess. And the clinical conditions are the pneumothorax and the pleural effusion. So that's it about the pleura. Thank you.